On the Bridge by Todd Strasser. I beat the crap out of this guy at the mall yesterday, Adam Lockwood said. He was leaning on the stone wall of the bridge, smoking a cigarette and watching the cars speed by on the highway beneath him. His black hair fell down into his eyes. How come? Seth Dawson asked, leaning on the stone wall next to him. Adam shrugged. The turned up collar of his leather jacket rose and fell along his neck. He just bugged me, that's all. He was bigger, probably a senior. I guess he thought he could take me because I was smaller. I don't let anyone push me around. What'd you do to him? Seth asked. He too was smoking a cigarette. It was his first ever, and he wasn't really inhaling, just holding the smoke in his mouth for a while and then blowing it out. Pretty sure I broke his nose, Adam said. I couldn't hang around to find out because the guy in the pizza place called the cops. I'm already in enough trouble with them. What for? Seth asked. He noticed that when Adam took a drag, he seemed to hold the smoke in his mouth and then blow it out his nose. But it was probably just a different way of inhaling. Adam definitely inhaled. They just don't like me, Adam said. You know how it is. Seth nodded. Actually, he didn't know how it was, but there was no way he'd admit to it. It was just pretty cool to think that the cops didn't like you. Seth was pretty sure that the cops didn't even know who he was. The two boys looked down at the highway. It was a warm spring afternoon, and instead of taking the bus home after school, they decided to walk to the diner. There, Adam had instructed Seth on how to feed quarters into the cigarette machine and get a pack of Marlboros. Seth had been really nervous about getting caught, but Adam told him it was no sweat. If the owner came out, you just tell him you were picking him up for your mother. Now the pack of Marlboros were sticking out of the breast pocket of Seth's new denim jacket. It wasn't supposed to look new because he'd ripped the sleeves off and he had washed it in the washing machine 100 times to make it look old and worn. But somehow, it had come out looking new and worn. Seth had decided to wear it anyways, but he felt like a fraud, like a kid trying to imitate someone truly cool. On the other hand, Adam's leather jacket looked authentically old and worn. The right sleeve was ripped, and the leather was creased and pliant. It looked like he'd been in 100 fights with it. Seth had never even been in a fight in his life. Not a serious punching fight, at least. The other thing about Adam was, he wore the leather jacket to school every day. Adam wasn't one of those kids who kept their cool clothes in their lockers and only wore them in school because their parents wouldn't let them wear them at home. Seth had parents like that. His mother would have a fit if she ever saw him wearing his sleeveless denim jacket, so he had to hide it in a garage every day before he went into the house. Then in the morning when he left for school, he'd go through the garage and pick it up. Seth leaned forward and felt the smooth, cold granite of the bridge with his fingertips. The bridge was old and made of large granite blocks. Its heavy stone abutments stood close to the cars that sped past on the highway beneath it. Newer bridges were made of steel. Their spans were longer, and the abutments were farther from the road. On the highway, a red Fiat convertible approached with two girls riding in the front seat. Adam waved, and one of the girls waved back. A second later, the car shot under the bridge and disappeared. He turned to see Seth and grinned. Maybe they'll get off the exit ramp and come back, he said. You think? Seth asked. Actually, the thought made him nervous. They must be old enough to at least to drive. So? Adam said. I go out with older girls all the time. Really? Seth asked. Sure, Adam said. He took another drag off his cigarette and blew the smoke out of his nose. Seth wanted to try that, but he was afraid he'd start to cough or do something else equally uncool. What do you do with them? Seth asked. Adam glanced at him with a sly smile. What do you think I do with them? I mean, do you go out? Sure, if they want to take me out, we go out. Otherwise, We just hang around and make out." Seth was awestruck. At a party once, he'd played spin the bottle and pass an orange and had kissed a few girls in the process, but he had never seriously made out. In the distance, a big semi trailer appeared on the highway. Adam raised his arm in the air and pumped his fist up and down. The driver responded with 3 loud blasts of his air horn. A moment later, the semi rumbled under them and disappeared. "Let me try that," Seth said. Another truck was coming, and he leaned over the stone ledge and jerked his arm up and down, but the trucker ignored him. Adam laughed. "How come it didn't work?" Seth asked. "You got to do it in a special way," Adam told him. "Show me," Seth said. "Can't, man. You just have to have the right touch. It's something you're born with." Seth smirked. It figured. It was just his luck to be born without the touch that made truckers blow their horns. The traffic was gradually getting thicker as the afternoon rush hour approached. Many of the drivers and the passengers in the car seemed unaware of the 2 boys on the overpass, but the few others stared up through their windshields at them. "Bet they're wondering if we're going to drop something on them," Adam said. He lifted his hand in the air as if he was holding an imaginary rock. On the highway, more of the people in the cars were watching now. Suddenly, Adam threw his arms forward. Even though there was nothing in his hand, a woman driving a blue Toyota put her hands up in fear. Her car swerved momentarily out of its lane. Seth felt his jaw drop. He couldn't believe Adam had done that. If that car had been going any faster, it might have gone out of control and crashed in the stone abutment next to the highway. Meanwhile, Adam grinned at him. Scared the crap out of her. "Maybe we ought to go," Seth said, suddenly worried that if they were going to get in trouble. What if a cop had seen them? Well, what if the woman was really mad? "Why?" Adam asked. "She could get off and come back here." Adam shrugged. "Let her," he said. "The last person in the world I'd be afraid of is some old lady." He took a drag off his cigarette and turned away to watch the cars again. Seth kept glancing towards the exit ramp to see if the woman in the blue Toyota had gotten off. He was really tempted to leave, but he stayed because he liked being with Adam. It made him feel good that a cool guy like Adam let him hang around. A few minutes passed and the blue Toyota still did not appear on the exit ramp. Seth relaxed a little. He had smoked his Marlboro almost all the way down to the filter, and his mouth tasted awful. Smoke kept getting in his eyes and making them water. He dropped the cigarette to the sidewalk and crushed it under his sneaker, relieved to be finished with it. "Here's the way to do it," Adam said, and he took the butt of his cigarette between his thumb and his middle finger and flicked it over the side of the bridge down into the traffic. With a burst of red sparks, it hit the windshield of a black Camaro passing below. Adam turned and grinned. Seth smiled back uncomfortably. He was beginning to wonder just how far Adam would go. Neither of them saw the black Camaro pull off onto the exit ramp and come back behind them on the bridge. Seth didn't notice it until he heard a door slam. He turned and saw 3 big guys getting out of the car. They were all wearing nylon sweatsuits, and they looked strong. Seth suddenly decided that it was time to go, but he quickly realized that the 3 guys had spread out, cutting off any way to escape. He and Adam were surrounded. Adam?" Seth nudged him with his elbow. "What?" Adam turned around and looked shocked. In the meantime, the 3 big guys were coming closer. Seth and Adam backed against the bridge wall. Seth felt his stomach tighten. His heart began to pound like a machine gun. Adam looked pretty scared too. Was it Seth's imagination, or was his friend trembling? "Which one of you twerps flicked that butt onto my car?" The question came from the husky guy with the black mustache and the long black hair that curled behind his ears. Seth and Adam glanced at each other. Seth was determined not to tell. He didn't believe on squealing on his friends. But suddenly he noticed that all 3 guys were staring at him. He quickly looked at Adam and saw why. Adam was pointing at him. Before Seth could say anything, the husky guy reached forward and lifted him off of the ground by the collar of his jacket. He felt his feet kicked in the air uselessly for a second, and then he was thrown against the front fender of the Camaro. He hit it with a thud and lost his breath. Before he had a chance to recover, the guy grabbed him by the hair and forced his face towards the windshield. "Lick it off," he grumbled. Seth didn't know what he was talking about. He tried to raise his head, but the husky guy pushed his face closer to the windshield. God, he was strong. "I said lick it." "Lick what?" Seth wanted to shout. Then he looked down at the glass and saw the little spot of gray ash where Adam's cigarette had hit. Oh no. He stiffened. The thought made him sick. He tried to twist his head around, but the guy leaned his weight against Seth and pushed his face down again. "Till it's clean," the guy said, pressing Seth's face down until it was only an inch from the smooth tinted glass. Seth stared at the little spot of ash. With the husky guy's weight on him, he could hardly breathe. The car's fender was digging into his ribs. Where was Adam? The husky guy leaned harder against him, squeezing Seth painfully against the car. He pushed Seth's face down until it actually pressed against the cool glass. Seth could feel a spasm in his chest and his lungs cried for air, but he clamped his mouth closed. He wasn't going to give the guy the satisfaction of seeing him lick that spot. The husky guy must have known it. Suddenly, he pulled Seth's head up and then slammed it back down against the windshield. Wham! Seth reeled backwards and his hands covering his nose and mouth. Everything felt numb. He was certain his nose and some teeth were broken. He slipped and landed into a sitting position, bending forward, his throbbing face buried in his hands. A second passed and he heard someone laugh. Looking up, he saw the three guys getting back into the Camaro. Car lurched away, leaving rubber. "You're bleeding." Adam was standing over him. Seth took his hand away from his mouth and saw that it was covered with bright red blood. It was dripping down from his nose and his chin onto his denim jacket, leaving red spots. He tilted his head back, trying to stop the bleeding. At the same time, he squeezed the bridge of his nose. It would hurt. But somehow he knew it was not broken after all. He touched his front teeth with his tongue. They were all still there, and none felt loose. "You want a hand?" Adam asked. Seth nodded, and Adam helped pull him up slowly. He was shaky on his feet and worried that his nose was going to start bleeding again. He looked down and saw his denim jacket was covered with blood. "I tried to help you," Adam said, "but one of them held a knife on me." Seth glanced at him. "It was a small knife," Adam said. "I guess he didn't want anyone to see it." Seth felt his nose again. It was swollen and throbbed painfully. "Why'd you point at me?" he asked. "I figured I could jump them if they made a move at you," Adam said. "How could I know they had knives?" Seth shook his head. He didn't believe Adam. He started to walk towards home. "You gonna make it okay?" Adam asked. Seth nodded. He just wanted to be alone. "I'll get those guys for you, man," Adam said. "I think I once saw one of them at the diner. I'm going to go back there and see, okay?" Seth nodded again. He didn't even turn to watch Adam go. On the way to his house, Seth stopped near some garbage cans at a neighbor. A neighbor had put on the curb for collection. He looked down at his denim jacket. The spots of blood had turned dark. If he took it home and washed it now, the stains would probably make it look pretty cool, like a jacket that had been worn in tons of fights. Seth smirked. He took it off, threw it in the garbage can.